If you're a mountain biker age 35 plus and you struggle with one or more of the following, then this video is for you. If you have burning legs or pain in your back or neck on rides or afterwards, you hesitate or feel fearful in technical terrain, or you just don't feel in control. You have a tendency to overthink moves. You fully understand what to do, but your body just won't do it. You suffer from blurred vision or maybe even vertigo at fast speed or, for example, in berms, or you need to take breaks on downhills because your forearms, your legs, your back, or your hands hurt. So if this sounds familiar, first off, you are not alone. And secondly, today you're going to find out what's causing this and how to fix it. If you would have told me what I'm going to share today with you back when I started coaching, and that's like more than 15 years ago, I would not have believed you. And honestly, you may think that what I'm about to say sounds totally weird coming from me as a full-time skills coach. But here it is. The one thing holding riders aged 35 plus back is usually not their technique level. Seriously, riding technique is very often not the main reason why riders struggle with fear, pain, crashes, and frustration. So what is it? Well, let's get right to it. The reason is that they're usually only focusing on one or maybe maximum two of the following 5 areas that make a confident and skilled rider. We call these 5 areas and how they interact the Roxybike control star. And these 5 areas are technique, coordination, strength and endurance, mental fitness, and flexibility. You miss one, and your brain goes into protection mode. And the biggest trouble we see is that the coaches who learn to ride as kids, they have most of these areas covered and see them as no-brainers. But for those of us learning to mountain bike as adults, they're not no-brainers. And that's why in this video, I'm sharing why these 5 elements matter in the first place. I'm going to explain how you can find out if any of them are holding you back, and of course what you need to do to fix it. So here's a bare minimum of strength exercises that reveal whether your body is ready for technical trail riding or riding manicured trails at higher speeds. Number 1 is to get down in a plank position on your hands and your toes, and simply to hold this position, paying attention that you're not in this position or not overarching, but in a nice straight line, tensing your core and your glutes. And you should be able to hold this for at least 10 seconds. Ideally, of course, more, but that's an absolutely bare minimum. And then, following up, you should be able to do 2 full push-ups, lowering down with your elbows nice and strong, no flaring elbows, no shakiness. That's an absolutely bare minimum that you should be able to perform to ride technical trails in control. While we were editing this video, I noticed, I'm sure there's going to be people watching this saying, 2 push-ups? She's crazy. That is so hard for women. And yep, it is hard for women, but that exactly is the point. And that is a perfect example of why mountain biking is harder for us women, because we have about 40 to 60% less upper body strength on average compared to men, but the demands of the trail are the same, right? We're going to be riding the same terrain, and if we want to keep up with the guys, the demands are going to be the same. And actually, the demands are even higher because the bike weighs proportionally more for us, because the bike weighs the same for the guy and the woman, right? But I'm lighter, so the bike is proportionally heavier. So actually, women are going to need more strength than men to ride the same trails and to perform the same moves. So you may be thinking, why does this matter on the trail? Well, when we're riding a mountain bike, what we want to do is we need to stay stable in our core to stay loose in our arms and legs. You may have heard that, just stay loose. What does stay loose mean? It means that the body is stable and the arms and legs are your natural suspension. If you don't have core stability, and that's what we're testing with that drill, then of course you're not going to be able to stay loose. So the limiting factor is that core stability and strength. The next drill to self-assess yourself is a squat. And you want to go in a about hip width position and get into a deep squat. Let me just show this from the side. You're going to be in a deep squat, meaning your legs are almost parallel to the ground. And what you want to pay attention to is that you have your weight even on the entire foot. So you're not falling in your heels, you're not falling onto your toes, and you want to have your heels on the floor. This is a mixture of strength and mobility, and of course also coordination. Why does this matter? Because you're going to be doing squats all the time on the trail. Of course, you'll be in a straddle stance, that's the way your pedals are, and you'll be moving up and down, hinging at the hips, performing squats, and you need to stay nice and stable through the soles of your feet without falling rearward and forward, because if you can't do it in the flat, of course you're going to struggle on a bike where you're on an unstable surface because the pedals are not fixed, right? And that's why you need that control and stability performing squats. So what you want to pay attention to, or what you want to be able to do as a bare minimum, is that squat, 90 degrees here, stable through the entire foot, and then you should be able to perform at least 10 full squats after having held that for at least 30 seconds. That'll reveal whether you have the strength in your thighs, in your glutes. That is an absolute driver for everything we do on the mountain bike, and you can test yourself by doing this straight at home. Another drill you can try, especially if you're looking into learning skills such as jumps, drops, and bunny hops, whether you have the power and the stability for jumps. And what you can try here is, all you need is a bench or a picnic table or any other obstacle that is about knee high, and you want to jump up to it, land stable, jump down. When you're jumping down, what you want to pay attention to, I'm just going to show you jumping down so you can see. So what you want to pay attention to when you're jumping down is that your knees are here in line with your toes and that you're not collapsing into the middle. It's super, super common for people to collapse to the middle with their knees when they're doing jumps like that. Why is that a problem? If you're lacking that joint stability, overall, your nervous system is going to sense that. You're going to feel fear on drops or hesitation to try jumps, and you're going to slow down before you even have the possibility to ride into a jump, because your brain is super smart and it's going to feel, okay, no, it's not safe, let's not do that. And those are just typical reasons why people fear jumps. One important thing I want to say right now is, if you've noticed that you're struggling with any of these, this is not a disqualifying trait. So I'm definitely not saying you shouldn't be mountain biking if you have these. This is just about getting feedback. It's an assessment that you know, okay, if I'm struggling with these, then it's normal that, for example, I'm scared of jumps, or I'm scared of drops, or I fatigue, I get arm pump, I get sore knees when I'm in long technical descents, and that you need to do something about that. That it's not a skills, or not that you're mentally too weak or you're not trying hard enough. It just means that that is the cause for your struggles, and as soon as you start working on them, that's when you're going to improve overall. So that's the main goal. So don't worry if you're struggling. It's not that you're bad, it's not that you're too weak, it's that you need to adapt or get your physical body ready for the execution of the skills. That's what this is about. So endurance, you may think, well, that doesn't matter. If, for example, if you ride an e-bike, okay, maybe it doesn't matter to ride uphill. But if you look at my heart rate on downhills, then you'll see that due to the added weight, you do need some endurance to ride an e-mountain bike downhill as well. At least if you want to ride faster or you like technical trails. Also, again, due to the added weight of the e-bike, strength is super important as an e-mountain bike rider, because this additional weight is super hard to control and jump and bunny hop, etc. And generally, you do need it as a mountain biker, so not only as an e-mountain biker, but as a mountain biker, to stay concentrated on long downhills for braking, cornering, pumping, and skills such as the bunny hop, as I said, as drops, as jumps, because all of these rely on strength and power. So overall, the level of skills you'll be able to perform and the terrain you'll be able to ride with control all matter on upper body and core strength, as well as leg strength and your ability to exert power when you really need it. So if you can't stabilize your body when you're on flat ground, your brain won't feel safe doing it at speed on a trail. The next element we need to look at is flexibility and mobility. First off, what's the difference between flexibility and mobility? Flexibility is the entire range of motion you have, and mobility is how much of that range of motion you can actively control. So it's the motor control is the mobility, and the absolute range is the flexibility. And we're looking at a little bit of both in this element. And the first drill to do that is you get in your straddle stance, so about the distance you would also have on your bike. Then you hinge at the hips and you just bend your knees slightly. So not as much as I have right now, just a slight bend. And you want to be able to bring your knuckles about the height, the medium height of your shin, or lower ideally. If you can't reach your shin, the middle of your shin with your knuckles, then you know that you're lacking the flexibility and probably also the mobility of this range of motion. And why is that a problem? Well, if we're on the bike, then we're going to be in that position a lot when we're riding downhill, and we need to be able to use the range of motion actively in order to stay stable when we're braking, when we're riding in techie sections, when we're in a berm and we have those compression forces. So we need that to stay stable. If you're having trouble using that range of motion off the bike, of course you're not going to be able to use it on the bike. So you're going to struggle with skills like manuals, with steeps, with anything requiring you to use your entire range of motion. And probably if you are very stiff, then even with braking as soon as it's a little steeper. And those are all indicators that you need to be working on your flexibility and mobility if you want to be a nimble mountain biker and if you want to get rid of all sorts of, let's say, problems related with fear, hesitation, sore muscles, sore back, sore neck. Then all of this could be related to exactly this coordination, this flexibility and mobility issue right there. The next one, and this is super common, especially with riders beyond 40, 50, or even older, is a lack of cervical and neck mobility. What you want to do, just as a reminder, you want to take the same position you had before, straddle stance, just a slight bend, bring your upper body low and keep that straight back, so you don't want to be arching. And in this position, you now want to lift your head and look ahead. And if you don't have this mobility here, then of course that's going to limit you in the steepness you can ride. Next, you want to look to both directions, first just with the head, and then you want to be able to rotate with your entire upper body into both directions. And especially this range of motion is limited for a lot of people. And the problem with that is that if you have that, then you're going to be limited in how far you can look away when you're riding steeps, which of course will result in a slower riding speed that's possible. Because if you can't look far ahead, how are you going to ride faster? Because your vision needs to go farther away when you increase the speed. If you have limited rotation, then you're going to be limited in the ability to corner, especially at slow speeds and at fast speed in berms where you need to rotate into the corner. And all those are indicators and limiters that come way before the skill or the technique itself. And if you have these, then working on those is going to unlock so many techniques for you and so much confidence for you on the trail. The next test is whether you're able to hip hinge or not. If you've watched my videos about body positioning, you'll know that the hip hinge is absolutely essential for almost every move on the bike. So this is how you test it. You look for a wall or a pole, then you move exactly 1 foot away, put your second foot in front of it, and now you open your feet about hip width apart. And now you want to hinge at the hips to touch the wall with your bum without your knees shifting forward. So this is what you don't want to do. You want to do this and without overarching the back. So you don't want to stick your bum out. You want to hinge at the hips. Bring your upper body low while keeping the legs relatively extended. Slight bend is okay. And you want to touch that wall with your bum. Just imagine there's a light switch back there and you want to turn it off and on. Why is this essential? The hip hinge is an indicator of how well you can activate the glutes versus just squatting down and moving the hips too far forward. As soon as you do that, you'll tend to collapse forward. You won't be able to brace against forces when you have long downhills, especially when you're braking, and you need that when it's technical. And of course, you won't be able to activate the core enough, and core stability is, again, the foundation for a lot of moves on the bikes. Let's look at this identical move on the bike. If you're hinging properly, this is how the movement would look. So it's a hip-initiated move, bringing the upper body low by hinging at the hips, by initiating the move from the hips. A common error is to have a knee-initiated move. And the problem with that is you can see that as soon as my knee moves forward in front of my toe, it's super hard for me here to stabilize movement in the sense of when I'm braking, for example, the body is going to be accelerated forward because the bike is slowing down when I engage the brakes. If now my knees are in front of my toes, how am I going to brace against those forces? It's super hard and very hard on these muscles right here. If, however, I'm hinging at the hips, I'm nice and stable, and now when I'm braking, I can drop the heels and stay stable through the feet without falling into the hands, which massively reduces the risk of going over the bar. And of course, it also helps with leg fatigue. So if you're struggling with leg fatigue on downhills, then maybe it's because you're collapsing forward versus hinging at the hips. An important point to add here is that when I'm hinging at the hips, that doesn't mean that I need to keep my legs extended at all costs. It just means that I'm hinging and then I can move up and down in this vertical plane versus, this would be a common error, moving forward and back or moving up and down by bringing my knees in front of my toes. So what we want to do is this and not this. As full-time skills coaches, my colleague Bernie and I have identified that a common reason why riders 35 plus, and especially women who naturally have less strength, are fearful and or just can't execute the skills they're actually practicing is strength and stability issues. So the real bottleneck is that the body isn't ready. So if you're watching pro riders tutorials, then let us tell you, trying to copy them, if you're not willing to train strength and the other elements like them, can be very frustrating. So look for realistic drills, and we can promise you that you can keep making progress well into your 60s, 70s, and even 80s. Why? Well, because we have hundreds of students who prove this to us every single day. So just a short note on why this is especially important for women, and especially as we hit perimenopause. Well, for women, average upper body strength is about 40 to 60% lower in women compared to men. Our grip strength is 40% lower on average, and even in women who train as much as men. Overall, we just have lower muscle cross-section in our upper body, we have lower peak power output, and we have a slower rate of force development. And these differences persist across the lifespan and cannot be fully trained away. Of course, a fit woman can be fitter than an unfit man, but if both train the same level, then the man will always be stronger than the woman. And with estrogen levels dropping during perimenopause, we lose muscle and power much faster than men. But guys, don't leave, because also for you, strength and power do decline with age, unless we actively do something against it. So this really is your wake-up call to start training. The next element is coordination, and a great drill to test yourself here is to stand on one leg, and then once you do that, to tilt your head from side to side and to look from right to left. And if you're struggling for balance while doing that, then this is a great indicator that your coordination of the visual and vestibular system, so your balance system, is not as, let's call it, smooth as it needs to be for riding a bike. Because think about it, when we're on a mountain bike, we're on the pedals, they're free to move, so we're balancing all the time. We're exerted to forces, because when we're braking, the body's stopped. When we're accelerating, we're thrown rearward. So we need to balance all the time on those pedals. That's why the foot wedge is so essential. If you haven't watched that video yet, I've linked it below. And we're looking into corners, so we're tilting our head all the time. So of course, if you're struggling in the flat on firm ground, we're going to be struggling on the bike. And that's why working on that coordination, that decreases with age if we don't train it specifically, is going to improve your mountain bike handling immensely. If you would like to do that, then do check out the link below for a free tip series right into your inbox. The fifth pillar in that Roxybike control star is mental fitness. Here's an indicator that you could benefit a lot from working on mental fitness. If you say things like, I'm really bad at cornering, I'll never learn to bunny hop, or I'm too old to learn. Because these are fixed mindset signals. That means that in your brain, if you have that fixed mindset, it is like a closed learning loop. So neurologically, your brain closes that loop and there are no resources allocated for improvement anymore. So your brain labels that task as done or impossible. And that means the learning system shuts down and the motor cortex stops updating movement maps. Why does this matter? There's something called the Zeigarnik effect, and that's why words matter, because your brain prefers unfinished tasks. That's the Zeigarnik effect. So every time you have an unfinished task, your brain will allocate resources to it. Open loops keep your attention and your resources active. So if you say, I can't do that, your brain is like, okay, well, that's finished, so why should I allocate resources to that? And the loop is closed, and your brain definitely will not learn it. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you're like, I'm bad at that. The brain is like, okay, that loop is closed, let's move on to something else, and then you won't learn it. And it's really powerful because you just need to add 2 words to that. And that opens the loop. And that is not yet. I'm bad at corners yet, or I cannot yet corner well. And that opens the loop. And that's why your brain is like, oh, okay, continued neural engagement right there. Let's allocate resources. And that's why you actually learn. And that's, for example, is something that you would practice with mental fitness training to change how you think and how you see reality to be able to influence your future reality. Another sign that you may benefit from mental fitness training is if you actually know the skills, you're strong and coordinated, you have the mobility and the flexibility, but still you're freezing or you're catastrophizing. So you approach a drop, you maybe have done it a few times, but you just can't get yourself to do it. So you have that catastrophizing, you have that worst case prediction all the time, it's very dominant. And what this does is that the amygdala in your brain, which is responsible for fear, it upregulates, and your prefrontal cortex, where the logical thinking it is inhibited. So your fine motor control drops and your timing and coordination degrade, and that's why your skill level cannot be at the level it usually is. And that's why even elite technique collapses under perceived threat. And perceived threat can be as much as just negative self-talk or catastrophizing and then focusing on that. So there are several techniques in mental fitness that you can then focus on changing how you perceive reality. And that's why even the best athletes train the mind, because training your mind, so mental fitness training, is a performance stabilizer. It keeps motor programs accessible even under stress. It preserves coordination when pressure rises, because usually coordination, especially if it's not at a high level, it will fall apart as soon as you have stress. But with mental fitness training, you can preserve that coordination when the pressure rises. And it maintains the adaptability in unpredictable environments like racing and more. So mental fitness is not just positive thinking. It's regulation, not just motivation. And it's the, I would say, ability to deliberately keep learning loops open, as I've already addressed before, and it's the ability to down-regulate threat responses. So you can stay curious and you have a larger capacity to refocus and to recover after mistakes. Generally, technique needs mental bandwidth. So fear and fixed beliefs will consume that bandwidth. And mental fitness protects that learning capacity. And that's why even pro riders will train their mental fitness. But here's the big key. A lot of riders, they watch tutorials or think they can just copy pro riders. They can just copy their technique, just copy their skills. But honestly, are we ready to train both physically and mentally like pros? No, right? Why are we trying to copy moves that are simply not realistic for many of us? But what does work is training like your body needs. So adapting to how our body has changed and then training to cater to exactly that. And that's why we have these 5 elements in our Roxybike Control Star. So if you want to feel confident, smoother, and controlled out on technical trails, then working on these 5 elements. These are, to summarize, technique, strength and endurance, coordination, mental fitness, and flexibility and mobility. If you work on those, yes, you can make impressive progress. But you miss one and your brain goes into protection mode. And this means technique, aka like riding skills, they can't work because they don't live in isolation. But as you can see, they live in a body that needs to execute them. And that's why all of this is systemic and placed together. But no coach, no bike setup, and no mindset trick will help you if your brain is stuck in that protection mode due to one or more of those missing elements in your control star. So if you have identified in this video one or more missing elements, then don't panic, please don't. It just means that your nervous system needs more prep. And you can do most of this off the bike. And yes, you can also do it on the bike, but what's important is both of it. Seeing the whole thing as a systemic or as a system and then working on it systematically, that's what brings the progress. So no, you are not broken. Please don't think that. You just need to build that foundation that most people and even most coaches skip or miss. One last word. Why do so many coaches miss this? Well, people who grew up riding, they often don't notice these limitations because they never had to train them on purpose. Their strength, their coordination, and their balance, they were built implicitly, just through years of play, while their nervous system was still super plastic. And these foundations, they feel normal to them. As I said, no-brainers. So they teach technique, assuming that everyone already has these foundations, and they underestimate how essential actually forming this foundation is for adults who start later or who return after a longer break, like having a child, for example. If you want a simple place to start, then I've put together a free on-bike balance course that trains some of these elements directly on the bike. And if you're riding in your 40s or beyond, you can also join my newsletter where I share practical science-based tips and I dive much deeper into exactly what we talked about today. You'll find both of those links below. Thank you for staying till the end. You will also enjoy this video about the neuroscience of learning skills. Leave me a thumbs up and see you again in my next video. Goodbye.